What if the strongest man who ever lived had chosen not to fight? What if, faced with pain, Samson had simply said, "Enough"? What would have happened to Israel, to the Philistines, to history itself? Have you ever imagined that? Because the truth is that on that day in the temple of Dagon, the fate of an entire nation hung on a torn, fragile, almost invisible thread. The thread of the will of a blind, broken, forgotten man. A man who had already tasted the bitter taste of throwing his own life away and now literally had nothing left. Today we're going to delve into the moment when the fate of a nation depended on one blind, chained, and forgotten man. But what would have happened if Samson had given up? Welcome to The Story Would Be Different If, the only channel where we take biblical stories and ask, what if things had gone very wrong? Temple of Dagon, Gaza. Circa 1050 BC. 3,000 Philistines crowd the building. Nobles, warriors, commoners, all gathered for a celebration. They celebrate the capture of the man who, for 20 years, was the terror of their nation. The man who killed 1,000 Philistine soldiers with the jawbone of a donkey. The man who tore down the gates of Gaza and carried them to the top of a mountain. The man whose legendary strength came from hair that had never been cut. But this man is no longer among them as a warrior. He is chained, blind, humiliated. His hair was shaved off while he slept in the lap of Delilah, the woman, who sold his secret for 1,100 pieces of silver. His eyes were gouged out by the Philistines. Now he is merely entertainment, a circus animal for mockery. "Bring Samson here to entertain us," they shout, and he is dragged to the center of the temple, between the two main pillars that support the entire structure. The crowd laughs, spits, throws objects. "Where is your God now, Nazirite? Where is your strength, the terror of Gaza?" Samson, with his empty eye sockets bleeding, asks the boy who is guiding him, "Let me feel the pillars upon which this house stands so that I may lean upon them." It is a seemingly innocent request from an exhausted blind man, but it is not, because something changed. During the month spent grinding grain in prison like a beast of burden, humiliated and blind, Samson had time to reflect. His hair, a symbol of his Nazirite vow to God, began to grow again, and with it, perhaps, a final chance at redemption. Samson prays, not the arrogant prayer of his glory days, but the desperate prayer of a broken man. "Lord God, I beg you to remember me, and give me strength just this once, O God, so that I may take revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He places a hand on each column. The crowd continues its celebration, oblivious. This is the moment, a final act of strength, a last opportunity for victory even in defeat, a final chance for meaning amidst the ruins of his wasted life. But what if, in that final moment, Samson simply gave up? What if the pain, the humiliation, the exhaustion were too much? What if he thought, "Why fight? I've already lost everything. My strength, my sight, my dignity. Let me just die in peace without any more bloodshed." What if Samson's last breath was a breath of surrender? In the true story, Samson did not give up. He cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he pushed the pillars with all the strength God had given him one last time. The entire temple collapsed. 3,000 Philistines died, the political and military elite of the nation. And the biblical text records something extraordinary. He killed many more in his death than in his life. Samson's final choice, to fight instead of surrendering, resulted in the most devastating blow the Philistines had ever suffered. Their leadership was decimated. Their greatest temple, a symbol of their god Dagon, was reduced to rubble. Philistine morale, which had been at its peak with Samson's capture, was crushed, and Israel gained decades of relief from Philistine oppression. But what if Samson had given up? What if in that final moment he had simply refused to fight? The temple would remain standing, filled with 3,000 Philistines celebrating their final victory over Israel. Samson would eventually die, perhaps that very day, executed as final entertainment, or later in prison, old and forgotten. But his death would be utterly meaningless, just the pathetic end of a warrior who had everything and through it all, a way through lust and arrogance. The Philistines would maintain their total supremacy over Israel. With their greatest judge captured, blinded, and humiliated, the message to the Israelites would be clear. Even your strongest man is nothing before us. Even your God cannot save you. Accept defeat. Accept slavery. The Philistine oppression, which had already lasted 40 years when Samson began to judge them, would continue uninterrupted. There would be no final victory that gave Israel hope and breath. There would be no lesson that even in our lowest moments, when we have lost everything, we can still choose to fight for something greater than ourselves. And personally, Samson would be remembered only as the Nazirite who broke all his vows, the man who touched corpses, he took honey from a dead lion, ate unclean food at Philistine feasts, and allowed his hair to be cut, the man whose gifts were wasted on personal revenge, prostitution, and disastrous relationships with Philistine women. Without that final act of sacrifice, there would be no redemption in Samson's narrative, only waste, only tragedy without catharsis, only unfulfilled potential. Samson's life is one of the most complex and problematic in the Bible. He is not Moses, the obedient liberator. He is not Joshua, the faithful commander. He is not Samuel, the righteous prophet. Samson is flawed in ways that most biblical heroes are not. He is impulsive, vengeful, controlled by carnal desires. He uses his divine strength primarily for personal revenge, not national liberation. When the Philistines burned his Philistine wife and father-in-law, Samson swore, "Since you have done this, I swear that I will not rest until I have avenged myself on you." And he killed many of them, not for Israel, out of personal rage. When he was hungry and thirsty after killing 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey, he bitterly complained to God, almost accusing him of ingratitude. His weakness for Philistine women was compulsive and self-destructive. First Philistine wife, disaster. Prostitute in Gaza, nearly killed. Delilah, his final downfall. He saw the patterns but couldn't stop. Each relationship brought him closer to destruction. Even the Israelites feared him. When the Philistines demanded that Samson be handed over, 3,000 men of Judah went to him and said, "Don't you know that the Philistines rule over us? Why then have you done this to us?" They bound him and handed him over to the enemy. His own people preferred peace under oppression to having Samson as a troublesome liberator. So when Samson was finally captured, blinded and chained, many probably thought he got what he deserved. He lived by the sword. He died by the sword. He threw away his gifts. He broke his vows. May his death be as meaningless as his life. But here is the redemptive power of that final act. Even a wasted life can have a meaningful ending. Even a man who has failed at almost everything can choose at the last moment to do something that matters. Samson could not undo his choices. He could not regain his sight or his lost years. He could not resurrect those dead because of his recklessness. But he could choose how his story would end. He could choose whether his death would be merely the pathetic end of a fool or a final blow against the oppressors of his people. And by choosing to fight instead of giving up, Samson transformed his personal tragedy into a collective victory. He transformed his death into partial redemption. He transformed it from a cautionary tale into a paradoxical story of hope. Without that final choice, Samson would have been forgotten or remembered only negatively. With it, he is included in the gallery of heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. Samson pushed against the pillars. The temple collapsed. 3,000 Philistines and Samson himself died together. And with this final act, a man who lived primarily for himself died for his people. A man who rarely considered the consequences deliberately planned his own death. A man who broke his vows restored, at the last possible moment, some meaning to his calling as a Nazirite, someone set apart for God from birth. The story of Samson teaches us an uncomfortable but liberating truth. No matter how drastically you have failed, persistence still matters. No matter how deep your fall, the next step still has meaning. No matter how much glory you have squandered, there are still meaningful choices available to you. Think about it. Samson was blind, chained, publicly humiliated, having literally lost everything: family, strength, sight, dignity. 20 years of leadership thrown away by his own stupidity. If anyone had an excuse to give up, it was him. If anyone could justifiably say, "It's too late, I've lost everything," it was Samson in that temple. And yet, even there, at the lowest point imaginable, persistence mattered. Fighting still made a difference. One last choice of strength, instead of resignation, shifted the balance of power between Israel and Philistia. One last prayer from a man who rarely prayed was heard. One last act of a broken man brought more victory than 20 years of arrogant strength. Each of us carries Samsons within us, areas where we squandered our gifts, broke our commitments, and were controlled by self-destructive desires. Moments where we are blinded not by the Philistines, but by our own poor choices. Situations where we lose so much that giving up seems like the only honest answer. But the story of Samson screams through the centuries. It's never too late to make one last meaningful choice. You can't undo the past. You can't recover what you lost through your own foolishness. But you can choose what you do now. You can choose whether to give up or persevere, and that choice still matters, perhaps more than you realize. Samson couldn't physically see when he brought down that temple, but finally, he saw with spiritual clarity. He saw that a wasted life could still have a redemptive end. He saw that persisting when all seems lost is not foolishness, it's faith. He saw that God still had a use for a broken man who refused to give up. The story would be different if Samson had given up fighting at that last moment, but he didn't. With bleeding, empty eye sockets, chained and mocked, he chose to give everything he had in one last act of defiance, and that last act redefined his entire story. Where are you giving up on? What battle seems too lost to fight? What dream seems too shattered to pursue? Remember, you are still breathing, you still have choices, and as long as there are choices, there is the possibility that your next act, even if it is your last, will change everything. Don't give up, persist, push your pillars. You may not see the result, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The temple can still fall. The story of Samson shows us that redemption isn't about erasing past mistakes. It's about what you do with what's left. It's about transforming your last strength into something that transcends your own pain. It's about refusing to let failure have the final say on who you are. How many people give up one step before victory? How many abandon the fight just when it's about to make a difference? How many accept the narrative of defeat that their enemies, external or internal, tell about them? Samson could have believed the Philistines' mockery. He could have agreed that he was just a pathetic failure. He could have accepted that his story had no further purpose, but he didn't. He chose to write one last chapter, and that chapter changed everything. Your life may be in ruins. You may have wasted years, opportunities, relationships. You may be blind to solutions, chained by consequences, mocked for your failures. But as long as you breathe, the story isn't over. As long as you can choose, there is power. As long as there is one last column to push, there is hope. What Samson teaches us is not that we should live recklessly and fix everything at the last minute. His life was full of terrible choices that caused immeasurable suffering. What he teaches us is that even when we live recklessly, even when we cause suffering, even when we lose almost everything, there is still dignity in choosing to fight for something greater than ourselves. There is power in refusing to die as a victim. There is redemption in transforming your last breath into a blow against the forces that oppress not only you but others. There is meaning in using what little remains of you to make a difference. Samson killed more Philistines in his death than in his life. This is not merely a dramatic statistic. It is a profound theological statement. Sometimes our greatest impact comes not from our strength, but from our willingness to use even our weakness and defeat for a greater purpose. The strong, arrogant, invincible Samson of the first 20 years was formidable but selfish. If the broken, blind, humiliated Samson in the temple was weak but ultimately selfless, and it was this broken version that achieved the most significant victory. This confronts us with an uncomfortable question. Do we need to be broken in order to finally live for something greater than ourselves? Does strength make us selfish, and only weakness teach us sacrifice? Perhaps. Or perhaps the real lesson is that God can use any version of us, strong or weak, victorious or defeated, if we are willing. Strong. Samson could have delivered Israel if he had chosen to use his strength wisely. Weak Samson delivered Israel because he chose to use even his weakness for purpose. What do you have now? Strength or weakness? Victory or defeat? Health or illness? Success or failure? It doesn't matter. What matters is, are you willing to use what you have for something that matters? Samson gives us permission to have failed drastically and still seek meaning. He shows us that we don't need to have lived perfectly to die meaningfully. He proves that the final chapter can partially redeem wasted chapters, but he also warns us, don't waste your life waiting for a dramatic final moment of redemption. Live now with the purpose you hope to die having fulfilled. Don't break your vows hoping to restore them later. Don't throw away your gifts assuming there will be time to use them much later, because the hard truth is, Samson was lucky. He had that final moment. He had the opportunity to push those pillars. Many don't. Many die in prison, blind and chained, without a temple to bring down. Many waste their lives and then waste their deaths as well. Don't count on a dramatic ending. Make each moment a choice to persevere, to fight, to mean something. Live in such a way that if today is your last day, you don't need a temple to tear down, because your life has already torn down enough temples of oppression, evil, and meaninglessness. But if you've already wasted so much, if you've already failed terribly, if you're blind, chained, mocked, remember Samson. Remember that there are still choices. Remember that there are still pillars to push. Remember that it's never too late to refuse to give up. History would be different if Samson had given up. Israel would remain oppressed. The Philistines would remain triumphant. And a man born to liberate his people would die meaningless, forgotten. Just another warning about wasted potential. But Samson didn't give up, and the story changed. You won't give up, and your story will change too. Thank you for watching. The story would be different if Samson's story proves that it's never too late to make a choice that matters. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that persistence still pays off. And in the comments, what story of persistence against impossible odds would you like us to explore next?